You haven't gone to provincial governments, as you guys hashtag welcome to Canada. 300,000 plus bogus asylum claimants across the border from the U.S.
What if I told you that while Canadians are struggling with housing, healthcare, and jobs, billions of dollars are being spent and no one can clearly explain where it's all going? Temporary foreign workers are waiting in line, following the rules, while the system itself looks overwhelmed and unprepared. Inside the House of Commons today, a simple question was asked, and it was avoided again and again. Is Canada fixing its asylum system or quietly pushing the problem onto the courts, the provinces, and taxpayers like you? Stay with me, because what you're about to see affects Canadians, temporary workers, and anyone trying to build a future here.
There's over 300,000 asylum claims. Your government, that will likely take 25 years to process the backlog. Your government has spent almost over $2 billion on things like hotel rooms for bogus asylum claimants. Bogus asylum claimants are getting resources that Canadians aren't eligible for, and here we are today. Minister, the Canadian Bar Association, Refugee Lab, Amnesty International, and other legal advocacy groups have argued that the immigration provisions found in Bill C-12 are unconstitutional. Several of them have said that they are preparing for challenges, that there could be over 24,000 court challenges. Have you, Minister, directed your officials to begin preparing to defend the provisions of this bill in court in advance of these challenges?
So thank you very much, member, for that question. There's two parts to it. The first, you're talking about asylum. So our government is committed to rebuilding Canadians' trust in Canada's immigration system.
Thank you.
Making our borders stronger.
Question, and Chair, I realize but I asked a pointed question, so I expect a pointed response. Have you directed your officials to begin preparing for legal challenges, to defend those in court? You're asking us to support this bill. It is highly likely to be challenged in the courts. Have you directed your officials to begin preparing legal defenses?
So thank you for the question. Again, the intent of the ineligibility measures are to protect the integrity and the efficiency of the in-Canada asylum system against sudden increases.
Thank you. So I'll take that as a no. With your word salad, which is just really unfortunate because you are asking us to support this bill, which virtually every legal association in the country has said is unconstitutional, and you're word salading us on whether or not you have directed your officials to begin preparing it. So would you say that it is fair to characterize, given that what you've just said, that this is an attempt by the Liberal government to punt the mess of the asylum system to the courts?
A direct question with no direct answer. This section focuses on how a clear question about legal preparedness was avoided. Michelle Rempel-Garner repeatedly asks whether government officials have been directed to prepare for expected legal challenges to Bill C-12. Instead of answering directly, the minister responds with general statements about integrity and efficiency. The exchange leaves uncertainty about whether the government is ready for the legal consequences of this bill. Important points mentioned below. 1. A clear yes or no question was asked multiple times. 2. The minister did not provide a direct answer. 3. Legal preparation for court challenges was not confirmed. 4. The bill's legal readiness was left unclear. 5. Committee members were asked to support the bill anyway. 300,000 claims and the backlog crisis. This section explains the enormous backlog in Canada's asylum system. Canada is managing over 300,000 asylum claims already in the system. At the current processing pace, clearing this backlog could take decades, creating delays and putting extra pressure on the system. Important points mentioned below. 1. The asylum backlog has reached extremely high levels. 2. Processing timelines are growing longer every year. 3. Temporary measures are being used to handle overflow. 4. Government spending on asylum management continues to rise. 5. Public frustration and concern are increasing. Bill C-12 and expected legal challenges. This section examines the likelihood of court cases arising from the bill. Bill C-12 is expected to face thousands of legal challenges. Without clear preparation, courts may end up making decisions that could have been addressed by Parliament, adding uncertainty and potential costs. Important points mentioned below. 1. Thousands of legal challenges are anticipated. 2. Courts may decide parts of the law instead of Parliament. 3. Legal uncertainty may delay implementation. 4. Additional costs may arise from extended court battles. 5. The government's approach raises concern about accountability. Misallocation of resources and public spending. This section focuses on the financial and resource impact on Canadians. Billions of dollars are spent on temporary solutions like hotel accommodations for asylum claimants, while Canadians face limited access to similar services. The spending and allocation of resources is increasingly being questioned. Important points mentioned below. 1. Billions are spent on temporary asylum support. 2. Canadians may have less access to housing and services. 3. Public funds are under increasing strain. 4. The approach raises questions about fairness and sustainability. 5. Resource allocation decisions impact provincial budgets. Public trust and system accountability. This section highlights how public confidence is affected by legislative avoidance. Avoiding direct answers and failing to provide clear plans undermines public trust. Citizens and temporary workers may feel the system is unpredictable and unfair. Important points mentioned below. 1. Avoiding direct answers reduces public confidence. 2. Lack of clear planning creates uncertainty. 3. Temporary foreign workers may feel disadvantaged. 4. Canadians may question fairness and effectiveness. 5. System credibility is at stake.
So again, I don't know what salad you're speaking of, but the courts have confirmed that neither the Charter nor the Refugee Convention require a particular form of refugee determination process. In this legislation, we have the PROS system, the pre-removal risk disorder, the pre-removal order, and so the government's position is that these provisions are consistent with both the Charter and with the Canada's international refugee law obligations.
So these provisions are going to be appealed. Minister, you haven't directed your officials to begin preparing to defend these appeals, so it's highly likely that many people will perceive the measures in this bill as a way to just punt. The government is punting this to the courts. Have you consulted with your provincial colleagues and come up with a cost estimate of the legal costs it will, cost provincial governments in terms of bogus asylum claims challenging the provisions in this bill?
Well, again, charter challenges would go through the federal court system, and that is the
but there are
responsibility of the federal government, and I've got the justice officials here.
Who pays for the legal aid, Minister?
That is the responsibility of federal government.
But there's also provincial support that happens as well, too, right? And that's what you haven't done. You haven't gone to provincial governments, as you guys hashtag welcome to Canada, 300,000 plus bogus asylum claimants across the border from the U.S. I digress. A recent news story involved over 200 similar stories where applications for asylum were used. They used copy and paste language, and they all shared a similar immigration consultant. Why doesn't Bill C-12 contain provisions to require asylum claimants to state their reasons for claiming asylum orally on the record upon arriving into Canada to prevent this type of fraud?
Government confidence versus legal reality. This section contrasts what the government claims with what legal experts are warning. The minister states that Bill C-12 complies with the Charter and Canada's international refugee obligations. However, several legal organizations have already indicated they are preparing to challenge the bill, suggesting that its legality will be tested in court. Important points mentioned below. 1. The government maintains the bill is charter compliant. 2. Legal experts have raised serious concerns. 3. Court challenges are expected. 4. The bill's legal future remains uncertain. Who pays the price for legal challenges? This section focuses on the financial impact of court battles. While constitutional challenges move through the federal court system, provinces continue to carry costs related to housing, legal aid, and support services. These expenses can rise quickly without clear coordination. Important points mentioned below. Under legal challenges will proceed through federal courts. 2. Provinces face indirect costs tied to support services. 3. Legal aid expenses continue to increase. 4. Public funds are under pressure. Fraud risks and weak safeguards. This section highlights concerns about system abuse. Reports of similar asylum applications linked to the same consultant raise questions about how effectively the system prevents coordinated fraud and whether stronger safeguards should have been included in the bill. Important points mentioned below. 1. Similar claim language has been reported. 2. Consultant involvement raised concerns. 3. Fraud risks were discussed in committee. 4. Public trust in the system is being tested. Provincial voices and missing consultation. This section examines the role of provinces in the decision-making process. Questions were raised about whether provincial governments were properly consulted before moving forward with Bill C-12, especially given that provinces often absorb the social and financial impact of asylum claims. Important points mentioned below. 1. Provincial consultation was questioned. 2. Provinces often manage on-the-ground support. 3. Financial responsibilities may shift unexpectedly. 4. Intergovernmental coordination remains unclear.
Look, excellent. Look, these are excellent. That's exactly why we're here today, to study these provisions. These are to protect us against fraud.
Yes,
and
that's
about
not
fraudulent
so that's
claim.
not in the bill. Why isn't it in the bill?
The approach targets fraud in individual applications as well as a coordinated fraud scheme to prevent systemic abuse within the immigration and citizenship programs, and does hold actors
I don't
accountable.
think that's not in the bill. Shouldn't asylum claimants have to prove that they made their claim in a timely manner instead of making the government do so? And why didn't you include that provision in Bill C-12?
So there are clear provisions in this act
But
in
not that
terms of the
provision.
ineligibility rules,
Not that
the one-year
provision.
deadline and the 14-day.
But those are likely to be punched at the courts, and some simple switches, which could have prevented people from abusing the asylum system, you chose not to include, which is interesting. Minister, have you done any sort of studies on the totality of costs of bogus asylum claimants with regard to benefits across the across jurisdictions over the last 6 years?
I just recently met with the the provincial territorial, and we actually discussed, that was part of the discussion that we also talked about it. We talked about the
What was
federal
it? What
support.
was the total cost?
I'm sorry, that's time. You're going to have to continue this in the next round.
How system abuse hurts Canadians and temporary workers. This section explains why fraud in the asylum system affects people already living and working in Canada. When fraudulent or coordinated claims enter the system, they slow down processing for everyone else. This means temporary foreign workers waiting for permits or extensions face longer delays, while Canadians see more pressure on housing, health care, and social services. Important points mentioned below. 1. Fraud increases delays across the immigration system. 2. Temporary workers face longer processing times. 3. Legitimate applicants are pushed further back. 4. Public services face additional pressure. Delays that impact jobs, permits, and stability. This section focuses on how processing delays affect real lives. Without strict timelines or early proof requirements, cases take longer to resolve. For temporary workers, delays can mean expired permits, job loss, or uncertainty. For Canadians, it means labour shortages remain unresolved while the system stays clogged. Important points mentioned below. 1. Processing delays affect work permits. 2. Employers struggle to fill positions. 3. Workers face uncertainty about their status. 4. Economic impact spreads beyond immigration. Rising costs felt by Canadian taxpayers. This section explains how costs eventually fall on Canadians. When total costs are not clearly tracked or controlled, spending increases quietly. Provinces and cities absorb housing, healthcare, and legal aid costs, which are funded by taxpayers. Important points mentioned below. 1. Taxpayer-funded services face higher demand. 2. Provincial budgets come under strain. 3. Public spending increases without clarity. 4. Canadians feel the financial impact. Growing uncertainty for those following the rules. This section highlights fairness concerns in the system. Temporary foreign workers and legal immigrants who follow every rule expect fairness and predictability. When the system appears unprepared or legally uncertain, confidence drops and future planning becomes difficult. Important points mentioned below. 1. Rule-following applicants feel overlooked. 2. System unpredictability affects long-term plans. 3. Trust in immigration, fairness declines. 4. Stability becomes harder to achieve. What you saw in this debate was more than political back and forth. It exposed serious questions about preparation, legality, cost, and accountability in Canada's asylum system. Bill C-12 faces expected court challenges, growing backlogs, and rising costs that affect housing, healthcare, and public services. When answers are avoided and safeguards remain unclear, uncertainty spreads not just for asylum claimants, but for Canadians and temporary foreign workers who rely on a fair, predictable system to plan their jobs, families, and futures. You care about how decisions made in Parliament directly affect your life in Canada, whether you're a Canadian citizen, a temporary worker, or someone trying to build a future here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I break down these debates clearly, without the noise, so you can understand what's really happening and why it matters.